It is 7 o'clock. This is the City of Evanston Planning Commission. I am Jim Ford. I am in the chair temporarily, and I'll ask staff to tell you why.
Thank you, Commissioner Ford. Our regular chairman, Scott Peters, is actually not able to be here tonight. He's actually at the hospital, and hopefully will be recovering soon. The vice chair, Richard Schur, is also absent. So for tonight's meeting, we do have to elect the chairman for the meeting tonight, Chairman Pro Temp. So if Commissioner Ford has volunteered, unless there are any other members of the committee that would like to serve as the chair. So we would need a motion and second and a vote on electing the chair for the night.
I make a motion for Mr. Ford to be service commissioner.
Second?
And serve as chairman.
Pro temp.
Chairman?
Second?
Moved, seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ford votes present. The ayes have it. Thank you. On the agenda, I would recommend that we defer under new business, item B, modifications to the administrative rules. Scott Peters has been very much involved in the development of those, and I think it would be better if we wait until he is with us. So my suggestion would be that we remove those from the agenda and put them on the agenda of the first regular meeting in January. Hearing no objection,
Make a motion to approve.
we'll do that.
We do need a motion and a second to continue that to,
Well, is it continue, or is it just remove and start over?
either way, we can certainly remove it and then put it back on.
Let's just remove it and put it back on. And then, under the item discussion, a number of administrative matters. The rules require that tonight we elect officers for 2015, a chairman and a vice chairman, that we deal with some committee memberships, and that we approve a calendar of meetings, regular meetings for next year. I would suggest that we act on the calendar, but that we defer the other matters again until the first meeting in January. And my thinking there is primarily that we are a bare quorum, and we probably ought to give the full commission an opportunity to be here before we elect officers. Again, without objection, we'll remove that item and move it to January. Thank you. Then, the minutes. You have before you the minutes of our meeting of November 5th, 2014. Are there comments or suggestions on those? On page 3, in the third full paragraph, I have asked Amir to check the spelling of Mr. Morose's name, the appraiser for the applicants. He may or may not be Morose, but I don't think that's how he spells his name.
It's spelled M-A-R-O-U-S.
M-A-R-O-U-S. Okay, so we'll correct the minutes there. Those were the only issues I saw with the minutes. Anything else? Motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Abstain.
All right, you got that? Nays? None. The motion passes. The minutes are approved. The minutes of Wednesday, November 12th. Comments, corrections? Hearing none, a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second? Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Those minutes are approved. Then the principal piece of business to come before us tonight, case number 14, PLND 0151, a proposed text amendment to the zoning ordinance regarding parking requirements for increase in residential density. This matter has been noticed as a public hearing. That's correct?
That's correct.
so that we will follow the usual hearing procedures on this. This comes to us, I believe, as an aldermanic reference, so that the staff are, in effect, the applicants. We'll ask the staff to make their comments. We will ask if there are any comments, questions first from the public, questions from the commission. We will then ask for comments from the public. At the conclusion of that section, we'll close the hearing record and proceed to commission deliberation. I do want to recognize Matt Rogers, Chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals, who is with us. And I don't know, Matt, whether you're going to want to speak or shake your head or nod your head as we wish.
We'll see.
Okay. All right. With that, Demir, do you want to make the presentation?
Yes. Thank you, Chairman Pro Tem Ford. So the only case tonight in front of us is the zoning ordinance text amendment regarding parking requirements for the increase in residential density. Just to summarize, staff is recommending to amend the zoning ordinance to establish parking requirements for the increase in residential density. That would be the increase in the number of dwelling units on a property. The issue is that the current zoning ordinance includes an exemption that when a person is adding additional dwelling units within a property without adding square footage. So if they're converting an existing, let's say, single-family home into a duplex or a three flat, they, in essence, do not have to provide additional parking spaces for the new units. And so on the slide, you can see the parking requirements for any new development from scratch. A single-family home is required to have two parking spaces. Two-family dwelling would need 1.5 per dwelling unit. That's in essence 3 parking spaces for a two-flat. Any single-family attached dwelling would require 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit, and then multiple family dwellings go down to the requirement based on the number of bedrooms. So studios and 1-bedrooms require 1.25. 2 bedrooms require 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit, and then the 3 or more bedroom units require 2 parking spaces. The other issue is this idea of coach houses that are the accessory dwelling units that people are constructing usually on the second floor of detached garages. Coach houses have been allowed in Evanston for many years, and it all started with the idea to house servants and also for family relatives. And that is an accessory use, and like any other accessory use, it was thought that the parking requirement and the demand is associated with the principal use on the property, so usually a single-family home. And the idea is that either the servants or the family members that are occupying that dwelling unit in the coach house usually share vehicles with the property owner in the single-family home. However, recently, in the last few years or so, maybe even more, these dwelling units in the coach houses have been used for rental purposes, and they're rented out either on a long-term or short-term basis. So because it's a new household that's on that property, they usually have their own parking needs. We did do some research with the surrounding communities that are comparable to Evanston, and then also with some communities across the country that we felt are a little bit more comparable. As you can see on the slide, every other community does require that a parking spaces be provided when additional dwelling units are created on a property. In Oak Park, the number of parking spaces required is based on the number of bedrooms in each unit. In Chicago, it's based on the number of dwelling units. There are, the number is reduced significantly for downtown developments and also for TOD developments close to transit stops. Arlington Heights, a little bit more of a suburban community, maybe not as applicable, but they also require, and it's based on the number of dwelling units. A 2-unit would need 2 parking spaces per unit, multifamily 1.5. In the downtown area, however, it's based on the bedrooms, similar to what the city of Evanston has. Columbus, Ohio, it also requires based on the number of dwelling units. They have a little bit of a different parking requirement in the areas around the university, and it's based on various formulas, square footage, number of people living in the household, et cetera. And then also we looked at Berkeley in California. It's actually based on the zoning district, so low-density residential districts require one space per dwelling unit. Higher density and commercial districts require one per each dwelling unit if there's 10 or less dwelling units in the property, and then if it's more than 10 units on a property, then it goes per square footage. And as you can see, the coach houses are generally not allowed in many communities. Columbus and Berkeley do allow them, and they do have parking requirement for those. So staff is proposing that all residential developments and the increases in residential densities do provide parking spaces similar to any new residential development. We also recommend that coach houses and dwelling units in the coach houses provide parking spaces, and that would be one space per the dwelling unit in the coach house. We do suggest that current exemption would still remain intact for the downtown areas, and that's simply to not discourage increases in densities in the areas where generally we want to see the density. That's where the transit stops are available, so that would be the downtown areas. Now, there's a likelihood that, those conversions would not take place because of the available housing stock, but nonetheless, we thought that we should keep that exemption for the downtown areas. So the table there summarizes the requirement again. Any conversion, and it's typically seen on a single-family home, like I said, when that's converted into a duplex or a three-flat, they would have to satisfy for, if it becomes a two-family dwelling, then they would need 1.5 parking spaces per unit. And if it's a multifamily, then it goes down to 2 bedrooms based on the bedroom count. For the coach house, we are recommending that 1 parking space be provided for the dwelling unit, and typically the coach house usually does have only 1, and it's usually a studio or a 1-bedroom. We do believe that standards for approval of text amendments have been satisfied. There are 4 standards. The first one deals with the consistency with the comprehensive plan. We believe that the proposal does satisfy that standard. It's consistent with 3 objectives within the comprehensive plan. The proposal will maintain appealing character of Evanston's neighborhoods with reduced parking impact on the on-street parking. It also recognizes impact of increased housing density and the quality of the neighborhoods. And we believe that exception for the downtown would still encourage creative, adaptive reuse of existing buildings. And what we have in mind there is basically somebody wanted to convert an old 3-bedroom unit into maybe a 2-bedroom in a single or 1-bedroom unit, then they would not have to provide parking spaces. Second standard, we do believe that it makes residential conversions and increase in density more compatible with the overall character of existing development in the vicinity. We believe that requiring parking spaces for new dwelling units does avoid adverse effects on adjacent property values. Additional parking or vehicles that need parking space would not spill out onto the adjacent streets, and that therefore would have less adverse effect on the property values. And then we do believe that providing parking on individual private properties would help maintain adequate on-street public parking facilities. So with that, I would open the floor to questions.
Questions for staff?
How would a facility provide 1.5 parking spaces for a 2-unit dwelling?
So it's based on a dwelling unit, so 1.5, it's rounded off. 1.5 is rounded to 2. But that applies to a duplex. So a duplex means there are 2 units. So 2 units, each of them needing 1.5, would result in 3. So a duplex would essentially need 3 parking spaces.
Just to be clear, an existing 3-flat, 2-flat, or single-family home that does not have a garage or off-street parking is exempt?
If they are not adding dwelling units, they're exempt. They can remain
They're
in a
grandfathered.
non-conforming condition. Yeah.
Okay.
And what happens when they change ownership? Is it still exempt?
Yes.
Why are we doing this? So this is brought here to us by staff. So what is the need for this?
So this was initially brought up at the Zoning Board of Appeals. There was a property that, number one is we see these oftentimes, usually 6 to 12 of these applications we see per year where a property is requesting that they add an additional dwelling unit, and it's typically either renovating the basement to accommodate a dwelling unit in the basement or modifying a single family into a duplex or a 3-flat. And so if they're adding, currently, the way the zoning ordinance reads, if they're adding square footage to accommodate that conversion, they have to provide parking spaces. However, if they're not adding any square footage, but just kind of reconfiguring the interior, they're exempt. So what you're going to end up with, if you have a single-family home that needed 2 parking spaces, and they convert that into a 3-flat that might have 3 bedrooms in each unit, that's in essence 6 parking spaces. So there's a deficit of about 4 parking spaces in that particular instance. So what happens is that, and a lot of times these are, roommates or people so there's multiple people that may have a vehicle, and what you end up with is that parking demand spills out onto the street. So there's less on-street parking available, and just it's a negative for the neighborhood.
Can I follow up?
I sense that the public has a question, but yes. Freeman, go ahead. Yeah, follow up.
So today, you all know where I live probably, but I have 2 neighbors right next to me, single-family homes. One has 3 cars, another has 4. I see and it doesn't bug me, but I don't understand how putting in a coach house or changing your basement requires or puts an extra burden on the neighborhood when I have neighbors that have 3 and 4 cars for a single family. I don't see the correlation I think if you're going to address parking, and I'm not saying we should, but I experience more of an issue of families having more than 2, 3, 4 cars. I don't see this as such a big issue. So I'm just trying to understand where it comes from. I'm glad that, and it's only for new, right? So everything's grandfathered. And so that's my concern about this.
I guess what I can add to that is the idea here is that currently the code does not require a property to provide additional parking spaces on their property. And the person converting and adding units, if it's not required, they will not do that. And so what in essence means that whoever's the renter will not have a parking space on the property, and they're going to have to park on the street. So the proposed text amendment would, goes into effect, and it would speak to these people that are moving in, but it also protects the surrounding property owners whose guests would like to park on the street, but those parking spaces are taken on a permanent basis by people who actually now live in the area but do not have parking on their own property.
Could I pursue Seth's? I got a question that I think is related. Let us assume, and I'm looking to the house south of me as I ask this question, let us assume that an owner of a bungalow puts in a second floor, adds bedrooms. They have added floor area. Now, in this case, they did it because they wanted bedrooms for their 6-year-olds. Added no cars at all. That would come under this provision, would it not?
Well, if that's still one single-family home, that's one single-family home regardless how many bedrooms they have or the size of the home, they still need only 2 parking spaces.
Because they have added floor area but not dwelling units.
Correct.
Okay.
So if they added for 3 bedrooms for 3 children that have graduated college and can't find jobs and they all have cars, they don't have to add space, so now they could have 5 cars. And 3 of them would have to park on the street. I don't see the sense in this. I think it's also, so in this, so for me, I feel that you're especially when it comes to coach houses. I understand that maybe for a 3-flat, converting a single family to a 3-flat, where you may have 3 bedrooms in each flat, and now you have 9 bedrooms. I really don't understand it for coach house. I understand it converting maybe a single family into an apartment building, but I don't understand it for a coach house.
I think Commissioner Freeman, Associate Freeman, welcome back, by the way.
Thank you.
I think as long as we're still in the questioning part of this public hearing, maybe we ought to stay with questioning. And I think at this point, I'm going to ask either Matt Rogers or Jessica if they have questions that they want to ask or comments that they want to make. And
Can I just?
come ask a question. How do I turn her on? Oh, yes. I do need, let me swear you both. Promise to tell the truth in this proceeding?
Always.
Amen. Thank you.
The question I have is when you're talking about converting a single family into 2 or 3, where in Evanston could that happen? And still be within the zoning of what that area was?
In many areas of the city, most zoning districts allow more than just a single-family home. So only R1 and R2 allow only single-family homes. So clearly in the R1 and R2 districts, you would not be able to do that. But in R3, R4, R5, R6, those are all multifamily units that either allow attached single-family homes, duplexes, multifamilies, et cetera. So if there's an existing single-family home in any of these areas, the property owner, if they choose to add additional units, which would be allowed by code, they can do that.
Big enough? I'm just picturing Evanston and where the housing stock is and what that housing stock is.
As I mentioned, it happens on a pretty frequently. We have 6 to 12 of these conversions per year. And they tend to happen in the areas close to the university because people can generate income by renting out multiple units than just a single family. And so oftentimes that's exactly where the issue is, because people that rent them out are roommates, and each one of those roommates does have their own vehicle often. And so the need for parking on site is even more prevalent.
I'm picturing that, but I'm still having trouble picturing where those houses could do that.
Well, anywhere around the university.
I live around the university, and that's why I'm having a little.
So any single family close between east of Ridge, between Ridge and Sheridan, any of those single family homes could technically be converted to. Most of them, depending on the zoning districts. And then,
I hear the answer, and I continue with my question in my head.
Mr. Rogers.
Good evening. Matt Rogers, Chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals, and I'm the reason you're all here tonight. The particular case that came before us, which kind of had represented a couple of other cases, was in, I believe, either a T or a U district. I don't remember exactly which one. It was a particular case in which someone was taking a single-family home and converting it into a 3-flat, taking what was a 3-bedroom home and making it into an 8-bedroom duplex, with the intent, although they originally had tried to make it a 3-flat, making it 11. The only reason it came to the zoning board was because they were making about a 20-foot increase in the footprint of the building, and therefore it was triggered to us. We had a number of people show up and speak to us and say, we don't like this because it's increasing density, we don't like this because it's increasing traffic, we don't like this because of X, Y, and Z. Unfortunately, the only thing that we had that we could hang our hat on was the one required parking space that was being triggered by that 20-square-foot addition. As soon as they found out that we did not grant that, they decided not to make the 20-square-foot addition and therefore convert their building without having any increase in parking. Therefore, bringing additional parking into an area that had restricted parking. It was on the border of the university, and like I said, I can't remember if it was a T or a U district in particular, but that's how they got around it. And so we had discussions kind of casually with staff. I actually came to City Council and made a comment to the City Council during one of their meetings stating that I thought it would be in the best interest if we were going to have increases in density on properties, that there be something other than the square footage for us to hang our hat on. And Alderman Fisk had recommended that this go to staff, that they look into it, and that they pursue it. And so that's why we're here tonight. Like I said, we only get to see the cases that we know have a square footage difference. And as you know, we make determinations, but we cannot rewrite rules. We cannot change the ordinance in and of itself. That's why we've come to you. So if anyone has particular questions for me, I'm more than happy to.
Commissioner Asaro?
So, thank you. If I understand this, just to answer the question that you raised, this is an issue that comes up
Without affecting it.
where there is going to be an increase in density. But the increase in density isn't just purely an increase in density, it's an increase in density that is directly associated with another unit. So a residence, the example given, if a residence increases its density, if it's still a single-family home, then this requirement's not triggered.
Correct.
And I think that the rationale for that is that the presumption is that somebody who is an owner-occupant can have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cars, as many as they want. But I think the rationale for this proposal is when there's an increase in density that then results in another unit, the premise is that another family is going to be in that unit, and another family being in that unit, not family, but somebody else in that unit is like in a condominium building or whatever. If you build more units, you've got to have a commensurate parking requirement. So I think that's the rationale for having the parking requirement. It seems to make sense. I didn't realize the frequency of this happening, but it seems to me to make perfect sense. If you're increasing the density in such a way that you're adding another dwelling unit, that you need to have other types of things that go along with that, so as not to exacerbate the situation for people that already, live within the area and basically need to either have parking or whatever the issue is. So it seems to make perfect sense to me, and I think that there's a clear distinction between, and I think it's important to understand what increase in density means. It doesn't mean just purely increasing the square footage. It means increasing the square footage tied to another dwelling unit.
Yeah, it's, the dwelling unit piece of it does seem to be critical.
And if I could add, I mean, obviously, anything that is in the zoning ordinance, there is a variation process for. Anybody could come before the Zoning Board of Appeals and request a variation if they fell shy because of space, whatever, and then the zoning board would look at that like we look at any case, weighing the merits of the case against the standards that we must find.
I just want to make sure there are no questions down here before I turn back to my left. Okay.
Yes, I can take the air out of the room. So these neighbors that were complaining, they were complaining for a number of issues.
Yes.
Could you please repeat those issues that they were complaining about so I have the correct list?
Well, I will tell you, and I'm on record here, so I have to watch what I say. Obviously, we were dealing with an area near the university. So there will be certain issues that are raised because of that university, which we often hear and often give the appropriate weight. Noise, enjoyment of their backyards versus other people in their backyards, traffic, parking, again, there's just a number of issues that are raised based on that. The one issue that did stick with us was the fact that the particular area we were looking at had restricted parking, and as soon as we start to force more cars onto the street, that is one of the things that we do look at.
My opinion is that this is an effort to limit the ability for other issues and using parking as a way to do it.
I don't think it is at all.
You listed 5 issues, and only one of them handled parking. So you started with noise, you started with, that's.
You had asked me,
Right,
yeah.
but there's 5 issues, so, and one of them is parking, and it seems to me that the issue here is more than just the parking. There's noise, there's the issue of it being student housing, and we're creating a citywide ordinance to deal with a specific issue around the university.
Now, I will respond to that in saying, you had asked me what issues the neighbors had concerns
Right,
about.
so-
Now, I will also respond with what issues the zoning board had, which we had no ability to address. Number one of which is density, creating an overly dense area in an area that is already restricted parking, which we recognize. We were not able to address the density issue because that was not the request that was presented before the Zoning Board of Appeals. The only thing that we had was parking. And so the concerns that we have about density, about overbuilding areas, were not able to be addressed in this particular application.
Well, I guess I have a question. Which I'm having a hard time framing here. Granted that there are other issues that these conversions may raise, that if you increase the number of dwelling units in a building from 1 to 3, that you may create issues of noise and whatever other impacts there are. Do I hear you saying that addressing the parking issue is a way of getting at those other issues, or is your concern that we be able to address the parking issue, recognizing that those other issues may or may not continue to exist, and you may or may not have the tools to get at them?
One of the things that we often have to consider, as do you in your roles, is opinion versus fact.
Yes.
And as we know, everyone has an opinion about how any particular development is going to affect their property values, their enjoyment of life. When asked to provide any sort of facts to substantiate that, it gets a little more difficult.
That's never happened.
The idea behind this was that in creating additional density, obviously you are creating additional noise, additional trash, additional requirements for parking, additional burdens on just about everything for that property. The idea was that we would look at a way by having the parking tied to the density so that if the density did change, we would have a tool through the parking in order to address that density change and make sure that we could lessen whatever impact is had on that neighborhood by one of the tools that was given to us.
Recognizing that the only impact that you can assuredly deal with in this case is the parking impact.
Correct. We cannot.
Of course.
We cannot control
Okay.
noise. We can make whatever recommendations that conditions we would put into properties to reduce noise, but that is not something ZBA has the authority to.
So if I hear Commissioner Sorrow is saying that given the parking problem, this seems like a reasonable solution.
I think it's a reasonable solution whether there is or is not a parking problem, because anytime we have in the zoning code, anytime we establish as a base, if you have, a multi-unit building, you have to have a certain number of parking spaces based on the requirement. I don't see this as doing anything outside of that established protocol that the zoning code already operates
Yeah.
under. I mean, the parking requirement section is, among bulk and everything else, it's one of the main pieces of the zoning. So I quite frankly, whether there's a problem or not a problem, this makes logical sense.
This is a matter of, you're achieving consistency in a sense. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Pagazzi.
If anything, not having it is to the detriment of those who do have to comply with the parking requirement.
I would just agree with that statement. I think I'm kind of surprised that the it's a flaw or a gap in the zoning ordinance. You know, it's surprising that it existed, and regardless of how this loophole was discovered, or, you know, I think it makes sense to address it, and what's being proposed is completely logical with the intent of having off-street parking requirements regardless of where it is and what situation you're in. I mean, any 5,000 square foot single-family home, not that I live in such a big house, but I mean, that could theoretically be converted into a 7-unit dwelling, multi-unit dwelling habitat. And no, we can't control how many cars a person in a single-family house has, nor should we. But I think we can make an attempt to regulate and ease the burden on street parking by a logical application of zoning. And this is just a natural progression in the code. And it's very consistent with other communities that are similar, with whether they have a large university or not.
While we still have the public hearing record open, are there questions, further questions for Mr. Rogers or Ms. Feldman? Of course you will. Okay, if that is the case, then I think we can close the public record and proceed to whatever further discussion we need on this. Is this your light, Mr. Freeman?
So when I made my comments before the public comments, I think you had said that the opinions and our we should save that for later. So I had started by saying that I have less of an issue of it for the multi-conversions to 2 and 3 flats. I have a bigger concern with coach houses, and especially a property that has a coach house today that's not being rented out, but is being renovated. You know, the neighbor next door has been renting theirs for 20 years. I want to do it, and now you're saying I got to have an extra space. And from my perspective, I completely understand that if you go to a 3 flat, they should have extra parking. But if an existing structure is there, you're not changing that structure, but your kids are no longer here, but now you want to rent that existing structure to students, and my neighbor is doing it, and they don't have to have an extra space. I don't get why we would now have an ordinance that demands an extra space for an existing coach house, which is now being rented, that hasn't been rented before. And that's what this ordinance does. So that's my issue. I agree that if it's a multi-dwelling unit, we shouldn't have it. I was still trying to inquire as to the real reason we're doing this, and I still think it's because it's near the university and there's a lot of other issues around that. But I understand and I do agree that it is a gap in codes. If you have a 3 flat, if you're building one, you should have the space. The parking spaces for a 3 flat, or converting, you should have it. So I agree with that. So my issue is more of an existing structure.
Well, let me ask a question to staff. Are there other incidences, are there other aspects of the code in which children of the household moving out of a coach house and renters moving in involves a change in status? You see what I'm asking? Is a coach house with renters in it different from a coach house with the family in it under any other sections of the code, or would this be unique?
If a property becomes rental property, it has to be registered with the city of Evanston.
But I think, not to interrupt, but if I'm reading this correctly, the proposed ordinance says exemption from off-street parking and loading requirements for existing buildings. Changes in the use or intensity of use of a building and/or land area which do not include construction of a new building or building addition shall be exempt from parking and loading requirements. So if there's an existing coach house, then it doesn't matter if they're renting it or if they're actually living in it themselves, because it's not an increase in density. There's no density being added.
But it's changing the use. I read it that the changes in use.
Well, then maybe that would need to be addressed, because
So-
if the objective is to address density, an existing coach house doesn't seem
It's an
to,
existing coach house. You're changing the use of it to a rental property where you might have a couple students in it.
well, I guess it just depends on what the word use means. If use means it's a residential use, then it's still a residential use. It hasn't changed.
But it is a rental. So it's a change of how the property is used. It's now an income property, right? So I'm reading this as that if it's,
But
I'm
that
reading this,
the zoning doesn't draw a distinction between a rental.
okay, so then an existing coach house, an existing structure that is used now for a coach house, they renovate it, they put a bathroom in it, they put a kitchen in it, because it might not have had it before, but the kids were still living there because they could eat at home, right?
That the coach house then did not exist. By adding a bathroom and kitchen facilities, you're creating a new unit in there.
Residential unit.
I know coach houses that don't have kitchens in them.
Then it's not a dwelling unit.
People are sleeping, kids are living in it.
Well, Commissioner Freeman, I guess my question, my general question to your line of questioning is whether we can solve part of a problem here without trying to solve the larger part of the problem. I would love to deal with the noise issue too, but it seems to me that's another issue. And maybe what we have to do is accept the fact that we are in fact imposing a burden on some coach house owners that we are not imposing on others because they're grandfathered. And it seems to me we do that all the time.
Okay. I can't vote, all I can do is argue.
Okay, Commissioner Picazzi.
I just need to clarify something. I'm not sure what I heard was accurate, because if someone has a legal coach house that can be legally rented to a non-relative, and they're using it currently as an office, or they're not renting it, they're using it as an office, they're letting their siblings stay there or a relative for free. That's technically not a change in use. It's still a legal coach house and therefore grandfathered in and not subject to having an off-street parking.
That is correct. In essence, this is for new conversions, new coach houses. Existing coach houses, dwelling units, if it is a residential use, it's a residential use, it can remain. The idea is, from now on, new coach houses, new conversions, the idea is that because there will be a whole new household living there, the idea is that that household needs to provide one parking space for them. If there is a need not to have it, there's a zoning variance process, just like for everything else.
What triggers this? Application for a building permit?
Correct. If there's an application to add sleeping facilities, cooking facilities, bathroom facilities, then it becomes a dwelling unit, and then it is in essence a coach house, not just a detached garage.
It has an address, separate power source, independent water service, all of that.
Okay, that's a dwelling unit,
That's a dwelling unit.
sure. Commissioner Freeman, do you have something new to add?
One last question. So if I have a coach house that I want to rehab for my son to move into, it's not been a coach house before, I'm not renting it to my son, but my son needs a place to live, and I have a property that it can easily be converted, doesn't have a bathroom and a kitchen in it, but I want to put a bathroom and a kitchen. Are you now requiring that house to have an extra parking space?
Yes,
This ordinance.
correct.
You know, I think there is a case where we should definitely do something about that. Because that son could be living in the same house, have a car already, and now that I'm adding a stove and a kitchen and a bathroom to my coach house or the facility, you're telling me I gotta add a parking space.
Okay, let me, yes, Commissioner Dubin.
Will he always be living there? There's the potential for you renting it out at some point when he finally gets a job.
He might have a job.
No, there is the potential for rental income there.
I'm just trying to point out, I think this is a flawed ordinance. I can't vote. I'm done.
I don't think there's a
Goddard,
problem with requiring an extra parking space for someone who's obviously going to be independent living. He's probably going to have his own car,
They're
so,
already in your house today with their own car. There's no additional car in that case. I just think it's a little flawed. That's fine. I'm stopping. Please don't laugh.
Commissioners, we can approach this in one of two ways. I don't hear anyone expressing any serious reservations about the changes with respect to multiple family dwellings. There are at least some questions out here with respect to coach houses. Do you want to address those differently, or are you comfortable including both of them in a single motion?
single motion.
I agree too.
All right, then if someone would like to make a motion, does staff have anything more they need to say about this? Okay, if someone will make a motion, I believe the form of the motion is to recommend to City Council the adoption of draft ordinance 154-0-14, amending the text of the zoning ordinance regarding increased parking requirements as related to residential density.
So moved.
Grazzi moves.
Second.
Asaro seconds. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye. The motion passes. Should we have a roll call on this one?
Sure.
Let's call the roll on this one.
Commissioner Pigozzi,
Yes.
Commissioner Asaro,
Yes.
Commissioner Dubin,
Yes.
Commissioner Goddard,
Yes.
Chairman Pro Tem Ford.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. If I am correct, there is no more business to come before us.
Not tonight, but we do have a special plan commission meeting next week. Just wanted to remind everybody, the plan development for 1571 Maple. I have received the required materials that the plan commission requested at the last hearing. I have also received materials from the opposition, so I'm going to try to post that on our website tomorrow. Some of the documents are rather large because they're just a lot of drawings and stuff. So we're going to try to figure that out, and if I can post it tomorrow, we will do that. And so I encourage you to take a look at the documents submitted. The packet will include the initial information that was for the first meeting that had just the plan commission packet from the applicant with the memo by the staff. So that's next week at 7 p.m. And I don't believe Chairman Peters will be able to join us at that time, but hopefully Vice Chair Scher will be able to.
Thank you for mentioning Peters. We're on public access, aren't we?
Yes.
Oh, boy.
We can certainly adjourn the meeting. And
Let us adjourn the meeting, and then let me bring you up to date on Scott Peters' condition. So is there a motion to adjourn?
I so moved.
Dubin, seconded.
Second.
Goddard, all in favor? Opposed? Thank you. We are adjourned.